Oh, like parts of the city.
Like, everybody comes here.
Yeah.
Do one week to go to fitness centers.
Just go to
Make
different.
it more convenient for people that are.
That's cool too, because a lot of us don't get to go to those buildings all the time. I think it would be totally.
But every once in a while, we can hold our.
Yeah, that's
Or
cool.
we hold it. The next one be the fitness center.
Oh, do you want me to bring it up your staff tomorrow? Remind you? Okay. Yeah.
Just. No, it doesn't have to be rotating all the time, but.
Every now and then. Public works building.
That would be.
Yeah. A lot of. No,
Rotate.
yeah, I like it. Change.
Representative or not yet, counselor. Representative.
I think chairs are much bigger.
This isn't the.
Last meeting.
And this your last picture? Yeah. This would be, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I didn't even.
Scott is online.
That's online.
Larch just got here. And I haven't heard from Tom.
Okay, sorry. I haven't heard from him either.
I see. That one.
Yeah, Abby got laid up. She's on the PSRB.
Oh,
So
yes.
Eric will be doing that instead.
In the regular meeting?
It's in the study meeting.
Study
toward the
meeting
end.
first?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So instead of Abby, Eric.
Okay. All right, we'd like to welcome everyone and call to order our study meeting of West Valley City Council. It is December 10th, 2024. We're beginning our meeting at 4:32 in the multipurpose room of West Valley City Hall. We have Councilman Fitzsimmons here, Councilman Whetstone, Councilman Harmon is online with us, Councilman Nordfelt, Councilman Christensen, and myself. We'll excuse Councilman Hune as he walks in. So Councilman Hune is here as well. We're also joined at the table with our city manager, Mr. Peatley, and our city recorder, Ms. Kamick. I will turn the minutes of November 26, 2024 to the council for discussion or motion.
To approve those.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
You and those stand approved. We now have our introduction of new employees. And we would like to welcome our new employees for the month of November. We will ask their department heads to come up to the podium and introduce them. So we'll begin with Mr. Morris.
Come on up, Taylor. I'd like to introduce Taylor Benincasa. Taylor is our community cat coordinator. And just to refresh all of our memories, since the state passed the community cat legislative action that requires cities to treat feral cats as a stable population or attempt to make a stable population. And so we trap those feral cats and then spay or neuter them and then return them to the environment. And that prevents their repopulation. They defend their territory, and the feral population of cats is more spread out and distributed across the city and is therefore less of a problem for any one particular neighborhood. So Taylor performs that function for us as well as kind of smooths out those community relationships and issues that occur when people find that a neighbor is maybe concentrated more feral cats than the neighborhood is comfortable with. So not an easy job, and she does it very well. She has a lot of experience with cats of all sizes and species, and so we're happy to have her and wish her luck.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. All right, we'll now have Mr. Pastrick come up.
Would you like to come up? Mayor and council, I'd like to introduce Karina LaFontaine, who's our new building permit technician in community development. So Karina is actually a West Valley native, is a Hunter High graduate. She had experience working in Cedar City doing the same function. And her role is really essential in our department, and that we pride ourselves in being quick in terms of reviewing, getting permits done on a timely manner. So she helps us shepherd permits through the process and make sure that things get done quickly and efficiently. So we're happy to have her.
Okay, thank you and welcome. We just told the developer we're known to be fast, so. Thank you. All right, now we'll turn the time to Mr. Arslanian.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. What an honor to present to you Kinsey Keeling. She's our newest addition to the Facilities Department, and she's one of our custodial crew member. And she, in that short little while, has received many accolades from our fellow employees for her enthusiasm, happy, smiling face always, and her cleaning attributes. And they love the areas that she cleans, and we're very proud of her, and we're honored to have her with us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome. All right, we'll now turn the time over to Deputy Chief Stokes for his introductions.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Stepping in for Chief Jacobs, who's out of town. 3 new officers, a veteran officer here, Manny Manriquez. How many years in Ogden?
December would have been 8.
8 years in Ogden, has decided to come here and make us a better place, right? That's right. And then a couple newer officers, David Broadhead, he was in post and got injured, and then we had him doing all kinds of stuff for us, screenings and working, and then he got back into post. And then Diego Ortiz also just went through post, and so they're on FTO. What shift?
Graveyards.
Graveyards? Days?
Graveyards.
Are you on your own yet? He's already on his own because we got a veteran, so that's good. So we're happy to have him. We need more,
Okay, all
right?
right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much and welcome, gentlemen. Okay, we'll move on to review tonight's regular agenda. And I'll turn the time over to Nicole. She's got some adjustments.
So we just added one item to the consent agenda tonight. Arcadia is the developer for an industrial project. And in order to convey stormwater and sanitary sewer, they needed to record private easements. However, the developer accidentally recorded the easements as public. So we basically just have to abandon that public easement that doesn't exist so that he can re-record it as private. So just wanted to get that through before the end of the year for him.
Now, did anybody have any questions on tonight's agenda? Okay, thank you. All right, we'll now go to our first public hearing for January 14th. And it is our budget opening. We'll turn the time over to Mr. Welch.
Thank you, Mayor. Jim Welch, Finance Director for the city. As mentioned in the resolution, this is the periodic budget opening or opportunity that we have to revisit the budget for things that have changed since the original budget was adopted. We have a number of items that are here, though most of them, the big lump, were included in the last budget opening that we had a few months ago. This one, there's a few things that have come up, and I'll just bring your attention to some of the big ones. And then if you have questions about anything, I'd be happy to take those for you. Under rollovers, we have the liquor tax grant, which is kind of interesting. It's called a grant, but in reality, it's a sales tax on liquor products that comes to the city for the specific purpose of DUI enforcement, which the police department uses. We call it a grant because we have to track it separately. And those monies that are not spent the previous year by statute are required to roll over. We also we have another item under here under grants called CDBG home projects. And this is the annual appropriation for CDBG. We usually get that after the budget is originally approved. So that allows us to continue to run this project. This program, and that's the largest item in our agenda here. There's another new one on here, bring your attention to, that's the Department of Public Safety Mental Health Grant. This is for the fire department. I believe this is the first year, Chief. Usually we've seen these go to the police department. I think they do have continuing grants for this, but this one's come to the fire department. So that represents a first year receipt. We have some other things that you'll remember from discussions about requests this year. We had some needed upgrades to the information systems network and security hardware systems. That was $320,000. We also had some transfers from the money that we received from deployments for the fire department for fires outside of the city. They get reimbursed for that in overtime and the use of our equipment, and have determined that good use is come back to overtime or else equipment. So that just makes sense. Let's see. There is also a grant from FEMA for about $800,000 that has a CIP match of $200,000. That was for a new emergency response trailer and truck, which I know the chief did bring before the council. And then the last purchase of a fire truck, that was to take advantage of an opportunity to buy a truck that had been completed rather than wait another 2.5 years to have one built. These don't come up very often, so that's why this budget is in here. And that concludes the budget opening. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Welch? I can't see anything from Scott, so he's good. Okay. All right, thank you much.
Thank you.
All right, we'll go to our resolutions, and we'll begin with resolution 24-75. Turn the time over to Ms. Young.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is requesting approval of an agreement with Visit Salt Lake for a grant for $60,000 for sports field improvements that we have worked really closely with them on. You may recall that you approved a tax for hotels as part of the Visit Salt Lake about a year ago. And this is as a result of that fee that's put on hotel rooms. And so this is one of the first grants that they've done in this manner to actually give money to a city to improve facilities for use. So they'll give us $60,000. We'll make some field improvements, and then in exchange, our commitment to them is to allow them the field use for a senior softball tournament, a national senior softball tournament that will be coming starting in July of 2025, and then in good faith work with them to continue to have other tournaments in West Valley City. Couple other projects that we're going to do with the money that they have given us are a scoreboard replacement of all 8 scoreboards at Centennial Park, which are original, which I'll talk about right after. We're going to do some sports, the infield, making sure the lips are nice and sharp, and do some infield renovations as well, and then replace some railings that have been damaged over the 25 years of existence of the ball fields. So we're requesting approval of this agreement to receive the $65,000 grant from Visit Salt Lake.
Okay, beautiful. Any questions on this issue? Okay. And Ms. Young has the next one, 24-176.
I do, thank you. Yes, as part of this grant, one of the things that we felt like was a high priority for us to replace is the scoreboards at the parks. They are 25 years old. They were installed actually by Pepsi as part of an agreement with them when we built Centennial Park. The new scoreboards will be nice LED, energy efficient scoreboards. They'll have a wireless control instead of having all the wired connections that are really sensitive and we've had a lot of issues with over the 25 years. They'll be wireless, and they have a 5-year warranty. And it's just another great asset to the park that not only benefits for the tournaments that we're working with Visit Salt Lake, but to benefit the users of the fields and the residents that use them for youth and adult softball.
Perfect. Any questions on this one? Okay, thank you so much.
Great, thank you, Mayor.
All right, we'll now turn the time over to Mr. Johnson for resolution 24-177.
Good evening. This is a resolution to authorize the city to enter into an agreement with the state of Utah, Division of Forestry, Fire, and State Lands. We recently, this past year, we applied for funds, for a grant it's a weed mitigation grant to go after Phragmites along the Jordan River. We worked together with Chief Evans in applying for this grant. Phragmites pose a risk, kind of a social risk, as they give a place to hide, but they're also a fire risk, and they just are. It's an invasive species that we've been combating. We combat really anywhere we have wetlands throughout the city, and so this grant will be paid to the city over 3 years, and we agree to it involves kind of the consecutive smashing with the marsh master and spraying of the Phragmites to have a long-term impact to actually eradicate the Phragmites in 3 specific areas that are defined along the Jordan River. There's a little spot, there's by 39th South, and then a couple of pieces, one piece by 33rd South, and then over by the Pioneer Crossing Park. There's a little patch of Phragmites that we'll tackle. So, and then we also, this also includes, I've worked with Chief Evans to, they've also got specific trees, that are Russian olives or other types of invasive trees that are problematic along the Jordan River. And this also includes some work for our fire department to come in with their wildland crews and do some physical labor for us, and they benefit because they've got certifications that they need to keep up in tree removal and whatever else they do on their wildland crews. So we get, they get training and we get work done, and then we get paid for it.
Nice. Okay,
So,
any questions for Mr. Johnson?
No match required from us.
no matching funds, just the work to get things done. We'll, again, I neglected to say this, but we'll also be working with Tree Utah to get some of these areas revegetated with species that will have a longer impact and hopefully keep the Phragmites out.
Council members get to ride the swamp monster or whatever.
Anytime you want. Give me a call. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, we now have our consent agenda. There's just one item on the consent agenda, and it's one of our typical easement purchase agreements and acceptance of a temporary construction easement. And then, does it have the other item on there, or is that for next?
Oh, that's the next one,
Okay,
the redevelopment agency.
so is this one Mr. Mills?
Oh, that's on tonight's regular.
Tonight's, okay. So are we gonna study it?
So we just added it to the
Okay.
meeting and
Okay. All right, so does anybody have any issues with this easement being done? Okay, seeing none, we'll move for our review of our Annual Redevelopment Agency, Housing Authority and Municipal Building Authority meetings. And it to Nicole.
So these are just our annual meetings. The only items of business that we have scheduled on them are approval of minutes and then the appointments of the new chair and vice chair for the 2025 year.
Which is on the rotation, so you really don't have a choice.
Will one of those put on hold?
Yeah, so the RDA, I believe, has the new council member for District 4. And the council can handle that however you feel is best. I think what we did last time is we appointed that position, and then once the person was selected, we just made sure that they were okay with that. And if they weren't, then we could revisit it. So however.
Surprised that night.
You all of a sudden had another new job. That's why it's more mindful of you than anybody else. Okay. Do you have a preference of just putting District 4's person in there? And then when they're put in?
As long as the council's comfortable with that, that's great. And then I can just make sure that they're comfortable once they're on board.
Okay. All right. Any questions on that one? All right. So is there any objection to moving the resolutions, the 3 that were presented to you by Ms. Young and 1 by Mr. Johnson, to our consent agenda for January 4th? Or would you like to address them separately?
I would move all 3 items on the consent agenda.
Okay,
That sounds fine.
we'll do that then. Thank you. All right, we have our communications and we'll begin with our Professional Standards Review Board annual update, and we'll turn the time over to Eric. Brain cramp for a minute. Mr. Bunderson.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Eric Bunderson, City Attorney. It was supposed to be Abby, but she got caught up with a client late. And so she threw over to me at the last second, and I think we can cover this. As you know, the Professional Standards Review Board is I think one of the most important boards that we have here in the city. They review every use of force amongst other things that the police officers do. And they're a very dedicated group of our fellow citizens who do this. In fact, tonight on your agenda, there is one more gentleman that we want to add to that group. And if he gets added, he will immediately get to work. And on Thursday, probably have about 50 police reports to read before Thursday. So part of the statutory requirement for the PSRB is that they come and report to you every quarter. And the things that they review, as I've mentioned, are all the uses of force by the police department, all vehicular pursuits, and all internal affairs investigations. So obviously, far and away, the biggest data point in those documents that are in your packet are that there were 702 uses of force. Now, this may seem like a lot, but keep in mind that every time our police officers remove a weapon or put their hands on somebody or remove their taser or anything like that, we count that as use of force. And we have this board review that. And the reason that we do that is so we can catch trends, so we can pick up on any problems, on any problem officers, and all that other kind of stuff. So for the most part, the cases that you see in here were in compliance. There were a couple out of compliance cases, and in those cases, the PSRB gave both recommendations and sent those up to the chief for further discipline. Remember, the PSRB does not actually discipline our officers. They simply pass recommendations of whether things were in or out of policy.
They also have the ability to send cases back, and they've done that a couple times. You can see that from the stats. And then you can see there were a few cases of disciplinary actions where the PSRB reviewed those, and I believe for almost all of those, or for all of those, the chief agreed with the PSRB's recommendations and followed through. Commonly, those disciplines include letters of reprimand, additional training, occasional suspension, and there were a couple where officers resigned this year before they were fully disciplined. So that is the first 3 quarters of the year for the PSRB. And that is my quick report on that. Are there any questions or any concerns about any of that information?
Any questions? Yes, he's got it.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. All right, we'll now turn the time over to Mr. Hill for our housing and rentals discussion.
All right, thank you, Mayor. I'm Brandon Hill with the City Attorney's Office. So we're going to have kind of a mixed discussion here because these two things really do go hand in hand. We wanted to offer some information to the council in response to some questions about rentals, but also how that fits into the broader picture of the housing conversation in Utah, what the legislative session is likely to look like, and how these discussions are going to change in the future. And we've got one fortunate member of the council who's abandoning us to go to the state. And so I'm certainly hoping that he's not going to forget about little old West Valley when it comes to these matters. But what we'll do first, I think, is talk about the rentals and some of the specific issues around that and what enforcement looks like, and then move to the legislative discussion, which is, as usual, both a little bit more interesting and a little bit more indeterminate and complex. So we can hit the next slide. We've got these basic areas of inquiry here, and I'll be happy to take questions about these or anything else related to rentals. So we start with the basics, which is federal fair housing law. And so essentially this is going to be things like your protected classes. So for instance, you could not pass an ordinance that says that women cannot rent housing in West Valley City. You would never do a thing like that, but that's the most basic level. Where we've seen the most action in terms of federal fair housing stuff tends to be things like group homes, group facilities for people with disabilities, sober living facilities, smaller rehab places, things like that. And so what the federal government has told us through a litany of court cases is that those kinds of dwellings are protected, and that within certain limits, we are required to allow them to exist. There are some things we can do in terms of occupancy and all that, but that's the federal landscape. At the state level, the Supreme Court has given us some kind of limited guidance in this area in a couple of respects. So the first thing they've said is that renting your home is a property right. Okay, so you own your car. Part of your ability to own your car, what it means to own your car, is that you can sell it to somebody else for money. And you can also rent your car or your lawnmower or anything else. And so the Utah Supreme Court has said that's property right. And when something is a property right, that means we can't take it away without offering just compensation. But they've also said that we can do things like restrict accessory dwelling units. And so this was the case in Provo City, where the Supreme Court kind of laid down this standard and said, you can't stop people from renting their single family home, but you can require to rent an accessory dwelling unit that the owner live in the primary house. And so they kind of split the baby on that. And they said it's a property right, but in this circumstance, you can have that restriction. The legislature has generally followed that. And so what the legislature has done is broadened access to ADUs. As you all know, that we've been required to allow ADUs in many more circumstances, but they've retained that requirement that the primary dwelling be owner occupied. Enforcing that is obviously sometimes the tricky part. You have to determine that someone is in fact renting the ADU, that someone else is living in the primary residence who is not the owner of that property, and then proceed with enforcement. So that can be difficult, but it can be done. Homeowners associations have a lot more authority than we do in this respect because they're private entities and they can restrict the private property rights of their members with their agreement. And so just as you and I can enter into a long-term lease where I no longer have the ability to occupy my property because you're giving me money, homeowners associations kind of work the same way. So in their CC&Rs, they can do things like restrict the ability to rent your units, cap the number of rentals at a certain percentage. And there are these carve-outs in state law which exist where they say, but HOAs, you cannot prevent people from renting in these cases unless you meet some fairly difficult requirements. For basically every lot owner has to agree in order to enforce things like this. So military deployment, employment relocations, parents, child, siblings, estate trusts, internal ADUs. As you can see, those are a lot of exceptions. And so as a practical matter, what that means is that when an HOA says, we don't allow rentals here, the answer is that you don't allow rentals except in these cases. And if you think of each of these cases, you all know somebody who fits into that, right? So when somebody moves to West Valley from Oregon to work for our fine police department, they might be renting their place back home, right? They've relocated or they lived in West Valley and moved somewhere else. So they've been relocated, they're gonna rent their place. You've got your family members, your parents, children, siblings, your military deployments are a little rarer. There's also an exception for estate planning trusts, which are a pretty common vehicle where people will place their home into a trust for estate planning reasons to try and avoid probate. So those are significant exceptions. They don't swallow the rule. Homeowners associations can still prohibit rentals or limit them in substantial ways. But these exceptions are generally going to be there. There is no flat out bar or minimum number of rentals that the HOA has to allow. It's more category driven. What HOAs do have to do is if they want to charge a fee to people for renting their units, they have to allow at least a certain number of rentals, 35%. And so where a lot of HOAs end up is at that 30% level or so, knowing that these exceptions exist. And so in terms of a development agreement, there's no flat out number that is required where you have to allow at least 30%. You can go down to 0, you can go up to 100, any number there works. The thing to realize is that given these exceptions, if you say 0, you're not actually going to get 0. You're going to get a relatively low number that is still greater than that. The last item on here is deed restrictions. And so this is something that I'll probably get kicked out of the city's guild for saying this, but I tell you the truth, even if it means people don't like it. A popular thing that is being discussed in the affordable housing space is this idea of deed restrictions. And so the basic idea is this, that if you're familiar with rent control in a place like a New York City or a Boston or something like that, the basic idea is you have a deed that says that the property has to be owner occupied and only sell for a certain amount of money, right? And so like if I buy a house for $400,000, the deed might have a restriction on how much it can sell for or require that it be owner occupied for a certain number of years. There are some folks in cities who feel like that's a pretty good option in terms of dealing with affordable housing. On the next slide, I'm going to talk in a little more detail about why I don't think that's the case. But what I'll tell you is that these are very difficult to enforce because they're on an individual basis and it's case by case, and it doesn't even resolve the issue on the property. So for instance, let's say we find out somebody's violated this deed restriction and illegally rented their home. We can take them to district court and sue them and make them move out. And then what? And so the legislative tools that involve deed restrictions tend to involve 5-year deed restrictions. And if you've seen the 3rd District Court calendar lately, by the time you successfully get your judgment, the deed restriction's probably up. And so I think generally speaking, they're an option that can be pursued. It's not a super great idea in my view, but it is something we can discuss if there's interest. These topics, I think, are maybe more pertinent in the immediate context of this legislative session, which is going to start here in about a month. There are a lot of discussions about local preemption. And something is going to happen. My suspicion is that the most dramatic things might not happen this year, but next. But gazing into a crystal ball is not necessarily a moneymaker. What I will tell you is that there are significant discussions about preemption. And what you're seeing here are proposals that frankly, even 4 or 5 years ago would have been considered way, way beyond the pale. So something like R14, R16 zoning of right. So what that means is if you've got a vacant property, you get to zone it, build an R14 subdivision. So R14 looks something like Daybreak, looks something like, Steve, can you give a quick example on the spot of an R14 subdivision? No,
Sorry.
yeah, they're smaller than you see, right? And so we do have R16 subdivisions in the city. They're a little more common than that. Those are a lot smaller lots. And so what they're talking about is proposals to do that by right in urban counties, basically meaning the Wasatch Front. I doubt that happens this year, but it's going to be discussed and there will be a bill. Not sure it gets out of the Rules Committee, but it's a conversation that's going to happen. Internal and external ADUs approved by right. And so this is the idea that no matter what, no matter where, you can do an ADU. The current requirement requires us to allow ADUs in some areas, but not all. There's a discussion about all residential properties getting to do an ADU. That's going to have significant consequences when it comes to parking, when it comes to general neighborhood crowding, when it comes to dealing with rental restrictions and subleasing and boarding homes and all of those things. And there's also discussion about, well, maybe we ought to look at regional housing planning, like something like Wasatch Front Regional Council, but for housing. I'm not seeing a lot of enthusiastic looks on your faces about these proposals. I'm not enthusiastic about them either. And I think one great example of this, we recently had a rezone application at Planning Commission and a lot of residents were pretty upset about it. And one of those residents was a state legislator. And so I reminded that state legislator, when you get back to caucus, don't forget that meeting, don't forget that hearing. This is what some of those concerns look like. And this proposal is much less aggressive than what's being talked about at the state. This last point here, I think, is really important. And a lot of the time, an issue will show up, bubble for a couple years, people will get tired of it, and they'll move on. That's not going to happen with housing, and this is why. In order to make starter homes affordable, so you've all seen the news about the developments up in Davis County, Weber County, where we've got these brand new starter homes that are super affordable for a 1,200 square foot house at just $380,000. Well, the reality is for median income on the Wasatch Front, you've got to see Great Recession price drops in order to make those starter homes available to affordable to median families. And nothing else bad has to happen. So when you guys lived in the Great Recession, did anything bad happen? I know it did because I was trying to find a job. This guy was dumb enough to hire me, and I have not left since. When you see housing price drops like that, there is usually something else going on that's pretty bad. There's usually a significant recession. There are changes in the interest rate environment that are bad, which we've seen lately, which still have not produced the housing price drops. So as these solutions are bandied about at the legislature, I think the thing to understand is those solutions aren't going to go away because this problem isn't going to go away. And so as long as there's this problem, people are going to have ideas about how they might want to fix it. And So the development community is obviously going to have, you know, both legitimate reasons to want to promote development as well as an opportunity to get more projects approved, sell more units, make more money, right? And so there are a lot of people who are pushing for local preemption for very different reasons. Some people think you guys just won't approve any new housing. Ask the folks at the Redwood Drive-In about that. Right? Like, we take tough votes at the local level all the time and make decisions like that all the time. But there is that narrative that that doesn't happen. There are some folks who say that local governments just don't see the big picture of planning and don't see what people really want these days. And what they really want is these day break style units. There are others who say that we just have to increase the supply and that will solve everything. And so we just got to build more houses. There might be some truth in some of those things, but this issue is not going to go away. And so these are going to be constant concerns. The reason I mention that is when you're looking at housing projects today and zoning today, I think it's a little more difficult than it was, for instance, when I started here at West Valley. When I started at West Valley, somebody would bring in a proposal and the planners would go over it and drive me crazy with questions. And I would answer them and get most of them right. And then we'd come to council and council would look at it and say, well, what makes the most sense here? Does this make the most sense or can we do better? Like, is there a better vision for this neighborhood? And sometimes council would say, no, this is great. We like this. Sometimes council would say, no, this isn't right. We're going to wait. We're going to see what comes next. I think in this context, the only honest answer to what comes next is we're not sure. We don't know. And so in the past, I think maybe the decision has been this proposal or maybe the ideal proposal later down the road. In the context of these kinds of discussions, it's probably worth thinking about, do we want to spin the wheel? Do we want to wait and see what might be allowed in 2-3 years? Will we have the ability to make this decision in 2-3 years? The only honest answer I can give you to that is I don't know. The other thing I will tell you is there's probably nothing you can do in terms of what your agenda looks like today that's going to change that dynamic. And so I think a lot of the time, my colleagues at other cities sometimes will say, well, we got to vote for this. We got to approve this because otherwise the state's going to come down on us. Well, implied in that is this idea that, well, if you do vote for it, then the state's going to leave you alone. That's not true. So don't make a decision you don't think is right because you think that it's going to solve this problem. It's not. You want to make the best decision that you can make for the city, for the residents. And these chips are going to fall where they're going to fall. I and all of you will do our level best to advocate for local control and make the case for why it is that these decisions are best made here and not at the Capitol. But I'm not sure how that's going to go. They always send me here with great news. Any questions, discussion about this? I'm happy to help.
I mean, this housing in general is a huge problem and we read about it and see it all the time. Someday, you know, we may see the market shift and we may see they're talking about this silver wave and other things, silver tsunami, whatever. We may see inventory rise more than the need, but that's probably years and years away. So my question is, are there any discussions about when a law is passed to the Capitol, it's really hard to go back? There are discussions about expirations on any of the proposals that are being 5-year expiration, 10-year expiration.
That's a great question. And this is a question that I think is worth discussing. Now, in the context of any specific legislation, it's tough to say, well, this is a bad idea, but with a sunset, it'd be an okay idea, because the next year you just remove the sunset and then there you go. I don't think there's that conversation, and that's pretty concerning because of exactly what you're pointing to, because what we have here in Utah is a unique situation. We've always had lots and lots and lots and lots of babies. Our city manager is a big offender in this. Nothing but babies. Yeah. None of them come play for OU. They all go down to the reality, though, is that's changing a little bit. We're still having more babies than most every other state, but we have sub-replacement rate fertility for the first time in Utah ever. And what that means, we're still growing quite a bit, but that growth is through in-migration more than it is through having babies. The reason that's challenging in the context of housing policy is simply this. Even if you build the housing inventory and you bump that supply up and bump that supply up, what that does is make you more attractive to in-migration, which is good. Like what Governor Cox says is correct, that, well, the only way to stop that is to start sucking as a state. And we don't want to start sucking as a state. So we don't want that to stop. But the problem is then your price problem doesn't change, right? So if I build 10,000 new homes and 10,000 more families move to Utah, this math has changed not at all. And so the reality is that if all the states aren't having babies, eventually the population, this silver tsunami idea, does catch up. And you can see in the urban centers of the East, some places where, Utah, generally speaking, is often a few decades behind some of these trends you see other places. You see in places like a Detroit or a Cleveland, housing inventories that were built for populations that are double what they have now. And, well, the houses are more affordable, but I don't think anybody is probably looking to Detroit as a model of planning. And so to answer that question succinctly, I don't think people understand that maybe something that's a great idea today or is an okay idea today may not fit in a few years.
Any other questions?
Supposed to come and present silver bullet.
I've got a silver bullet and his name is Jake Fitissimano. We got this guy, Jake Fitissimano, and he's gonna fix everything. If you know that movie quote, then you're my friend. It's from Idiocracy. Check it out. But as we go forward, so during the legislative session, we'll keep you posted. And obviously not only at council meetings, but anytime. I am happy to help with anything that might come up, and I'll be asking you for guidance as well, because some of this stuff is likely to be touchy and you may have some either or decisions that aren't real obvious. And so I appreciate in advance your help, and I swear it's not my fault. Thank you. Oh, Mayor.
No, you're good. Thank you. All right, to the council calendar. Are there any concerns or questions? Seeing none. Potential future agenda items?
I have a couple of them.
Okay.
I'll go along with Brandon, brought up, and so I just have something I want to ask you guys. Maybe you guys want to hear from you guys. What do you think about this? Like a big apartment complex here in our city, and they have a good operation. Basically, they have a background check and everything, check employment, and very much they're doing a very good job before you get in, you rent a place from them. But like individual landowner or single housing, then people they tend not doing that, do the background check, or employment history or something. That create a little bit problem. Even I have some rental business right here in our city, but I would love to have police department to do the background check, and we pay them just like we pay everybody else, just like every single one on the street. I mean, like people, they charge $80 or $100 for background check, and the office will do the same thing. The reason why we're doing that, because we have to screen all the bad apples out of our city. Apartment complex, they have, like I said, they doing that, and they don't have that much problem. But single housings is the problem we have. They have some that, but also bad apple or bad people. No, not bad people, but not very good people. They take advantage of that. They're not gonna rent with the apartment complex, but they go to rent with the individual single home. And because they don't have background check, they don't know anything, and that create a problem with drugs and so many things, gangs in our city. So I kind of like, I want to scan those and then use our police department. We're not gonna, use police department, not gonna pay anything. They do the same thing. They do background check and they make money out of it. And that make this, our city try to avoid with the bad apple, that's what I'm trying to say. That's the first thing. The second thing is, 4 years ago, we came up with residential sustainability. I mean, like zero energy. The reason we're doing that at 2020, the reason we're doing that because we said, well, we're gonna go, first guy in town, first city in this valley, and try to do that kind of model. And the reason we said, well, because we have some fill-in or pocket, and we want to do that, not big, maybe 4 or 5 acres, 6 acres, under 10 acres. So we can do that. But the last 4 years, I haven't seen anything. When we started 2020, only one particular property on 3200 West and 3724 South, we put that kind of target for, zero energy zone, like RS that we call. That's 4 acres. And from 2020 until now, 2024, I have seen so many pockets of fill-in land, 6 acres, 5 acres, 8 acres, and under 10 acres. They don't have to do that. And it's look like our goals seem like we target one person because we're trying with not do any other guys, but try to target this guy. And I don't know why. It's to me, are we gonna do it for every single one of them, or we just do only one person? Because the last 4 years, I have not seen any fill-in or pocket land is ask them for RS, except for one lot. And that lot, I just mentioned 3200 West and 3724 South is ask them for RS. And we try to do that we said, well, because we just start to have a zero energy in our city with the pocket land. Is that we still doing that, or we just, I have no idea. That's what I want to ask you guys.
On the sustainable housing, it's there for the developers to use if they want to build that. That's totally on the developers, not on us to be able to. It's just another option for them. So I don't know personally, I don't know if staff could give us a report of why builders aren't building that way, but I don't think it's anything that we can change. It's definitely the builders coming in and asking for it. So would you like a report from staff to see if the trend is going that way or away from that?
Yeah, I would love to see something here, Mayor. the builder, they're not asking that we designate that location for RS. But other location, we don't do that, and that's unfair practice.
I think maybe we need a presentation on how it works again, because I think you can put it anywhere in the city you want to put it. But let's clarify, let's have staff present in January of what our standards are and see if it's something we're doing or if the developers just aren't interested in building that right now.
Yeah,
And then on your other one, I know there's other places you can go get background checks on your own when you're a small business rental. And maybe we can ask staff to give us a rundown on that. I know there's county facilities that do those background checks for you. And so we might be duplicating services, but let's let staff give us a report as if that's a need or if it's a duplication of county services.
No, I meant maybe I'll probably, I said that message out, maybe wrong message, but I meant if they don't do that, the police department, our police department will give them a fine.
So we used to have the Good Landlord program that kind of did that, and the state took away that ability. So let's get clarification from our legal department as if that ability was taken away from us. I think that Good Landlord was like 5 or more years ago, but that was taken away from us being able to do that. So we can ask staff to give us a report on that as well.
Yeah, so something like that, because I think there's I'm trying to scan all the bad apple out. That
Yeah.
basically just, if they don't do the background check, they have to pay the fine. That's my bottom line.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can ask legal for clarification on that if we can do it. Okay, thank you. Any other potential future agenda items? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to council reports. Anybody been to any fun things?
I was at the Christmas concert in Cultural Center last week. Symphony. Very good concert. And went after a long day and it was very refreshing to
Oh,
get down there and have that. Last night budget adoption for the mosquito abatement district for the coming years. We are functioning again for another year. So we probably do a truth in taxation next year. We'll have to adjust some of the base rates and things like that. Until then, we're still functioning and mosquitoes have now gone to bed because of the weather, so we don't have to worry about them.
okay, thank you. Anyone else?
The mayor and I attended the interfaith Christmas celebration sing along. I don't know what to call it. Poiva at the Tongan United Methodist Church, and the mayor's great Christmas message and to hang out with the community. I think there were 11 different congregations that were all there that night, represented, a lot of them based here in the city.
Really nice program. Last night, we had the program at Hunter High School, the interfaith, or Granger. Sorry, Hunter's just my kids'. So Granger High School, and they did a really, really good job. It was very enjoyable. And to have all the participating faiths have different parts of the program were really nice. And then Santa and the Grinch and cookies. Okay, seeing no other reports, do we have a need for a closed session? No, okay, so we just have one more motion to adjourn. Anybody like to make that motion? Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. And we stand adjourned. See you in the other room at 6:30.